does Jefferson mention Jewish people, Judaism, anything about that in his writings? And again, without comparing him to Washington, certainly, Washington's visit to the Touro Synagogue in Rhode Island and the subsequent letter was a landmark in terms of separation of church and state by a totally different religious group that didn't have a lot of people, as you said, at that time. Where does Jefferson, what's his attitude and views, if he had?
Well, I'll confess, this is not a question I've looked at really closely, so I will be hesitant in what I have to say. My impressions are two things. One is it's quite clear that Jefferson was appalled by any legal restriction based on religious belief. Absolutely appalled by that. And there were such restrictions on Jews in America. Now, they're not by the federal government, but they're by state and local governments. Restrictions on whether they could go to college. And Jefferson's quite clear. There will be no such restriction at UVA. Now, we might think this is a small thing, but it was a big thing at the time because the other colleges, good luck if you're Jewish going to Harvard. You're not going to get in. But he's absolutely insistent. And I recall vaguely one letter that's written to him by somebody, saying, are you going to welcome Jewish students at UVA? And he writes back very clearly, absolutely. Now, Jefferson he reads religious texts. He reads the Quran, of all things. So for very few people who read the Quran who were not themselves practicing Muslims, who were very few in America at that time. But Jefferson reads it very closely. He reads the Old Testament very closely. He had an intellectual interest in this. But I think he didn't really have sympathy for the Jewish faith per se, because it's so reliant on tradition, which is so opposed to. So the notion that you could adhere to a faith that was thousands of years old, that had quite specific codes of behavior, which Jefferson would regard as irrational behavior. He thought of it as superstition. He thought of it as something that people would evolve away from eventually, but that it wasn't helpful to be imposing restrictions by a government or any institution to bar such people from receiving higher education or any form of education. So I would say Jefferson, because of his habits of mind and his own prejudices, which were intellectual prejudices rather than ethnic or religious prejudices per se. But he writes terrible things about Presbyterians, for example. So he doesn't have a great deal of sympathy for people who have a passionate engagement with a religious faith, which is very old. It's just for his own particular personality and his intellectual engagements, he doesn't understand that. He just doesn't understand it. But he does understand the pernicious nature of restricting people based upon their faith.